Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod, episode number 64. And this is a big one, guys. I mean, you guys, well, you've seen the thumbnail if you're watching on YouTube, and you've seen the title. Of course, we are going to be talking about not just the Fantastic Four First Steps trailer, which of course we will be talking about, but also Jurassic World Rebirth. We have tons of just random little X-Men reports here and there with mutants, and of course Captain America Brave New World is coming out, and so we're going to be doing a segment on our hopes and expectations and predictions for that movie, and the director's been making some comments about adamantium, and so a lot of really interesting things. And of course next week is probably going to be trailer-centric, right? Because we have the Super Bowl coming up, and so I'm excited about that, just to see, what the outcome is of that. I mean, not as interested in the game, frankly. I do watch football. I'm not going to reveal who my team is, but not super thrilled about the two teams playing. Anyways, that's a whole aside. But we're going to be getting a lot of trailers, and so it's going to be a very exciting time. And then of course, we'll be talking about Captain America: Brave New World. Hopefully next week's episode will be Captain America: Brave New World review, because I should be able to see it and include it in the next week's episode. Anyways, that is a lot to look forward to. But guys, if you are watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, let me know in the comments what you think about the podcast and what you think about any of the topics down below. And also, we are on Apple Podcasts, we are on Spotify as well, and we are on Overcast, so make sure to go check us out there. I am also starting something new. I started it last week, but I did it after I recorded and finished recording this intro and the editing of the video and whatnot, so wasn't able to announce it. I think I talked about it on the live stream, though, which I did my first big live stream last week. You can go check it out on the YouTube channel. But we're actually going to be releasing the full podcast episode on the audio-only platforms a little bit early. So we're going to be releasing it Saturday mornings every single week, just to keep it consistent, because the video version of the podcast comes out, kind of varies just depending on what the segments are, because like I said before, it doesn't really make sense to have a segment about, predicting Super Bowl trailers, for example, come out after the Super Bowl, right? So we're going to be, we usually maneuver it around so that the most important and most relevant segments that need to come out early come out before the actual podcast episode on YouTube. But for audio people, if you're interested in listening to the full podcast before any of that happens, it will be on the audio only platforms every week, Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Pacific. So if you're interested, go check it out there. That is enough for the intro. It's been a long intro. Sorry about that, guys. And let's get into the topics. Alrighty, guys. So one of the biggest surprises from Deadpool and Wolverine, at least before one of the trailers spoiled it, because obviously, they had to do that to get people in the theater. But anyways, one of the biggest surprises, sans the trailer, was the reappearance of Dafne Keen as Laura, aka X-23 from Logan. Whether or not she was the same version of X-23 as in Logan, it's hard to say. It seems that, with the multiverse, you could just say it was either the same universe or a very similar one. So anyways, it was really good to see her, because Logan, one of my personal favorite comic book movies, she was a revelation in that film. And to think that she was so young when she did that film and yet gave such a heartfelt performance, especially in the scene where Logan, spoiler alert for Logan, is dying, it was remarkable. And so to see her back as an older version of Laura was really awesome. So then, we went along the film, we were watching the film, and most of the people there got left in the void: Gambit, Elektra, Blade. But then, at the end of the movie, well, she was there in, I don't remember exactly what Earth it was called, but, Deadpool and Wolverine's Earth, the X-Men universe Earth. She was there. She was just hanging out. And so the speculation then became, okay, so she's still around. Is she going to show up? Because one would assume that if and when Deadpool shows up again, and I'm going to assume if and when Wolverine shows up again in Secret Wars, they're probably going to come from that universe, right? And then if they come from that universe, it probably means that, well, she's going to be there. So is she going to show up again? So recently, Dafne Keen was doing an interview with The Direct, one of the movie news websites, and she gave a couple quotes here about whether or not she'd be interested in a future appearance, and then what that might potentially look like. So there are a couple quotes here that I'm going to read out, and then we'll talk about that. So when she was asked, so she's basically being asked first if she would like to see Laura return. I'm just going to read from The Direct. Keen wants to, quote, see her in a fun team up. So this is the full quote here that Dafne Keen made. Quote, I would love to see her in a fun team up, rather. I would also love to see Laura in smaller stories as well. I enjoyed playing her in Logan, which was much more grittier, so that's fun. But I'd also be very, very open to a big whole action fight team up with the Avengers. Okay. Very interesting. And then her next quote, so the direct asks her, there's this theory that after Avengers Secret Wars, there's going to be a reset in the MCU, like a rearranging of characters. And after Secret Wars, fans want you to be the Wolverine in the MCU. Sorry, Hugh Jackman. And Dafne Keen responds, quote, well, can we both, Laura and Logan, be there? Yeah? Okay, good. If we're both there, I'd be really happy. The direct responds, would that be an exciting prospect? And Dafne Keen responds, wonderful. Yes. Honestly, anything that involves Laura, I'd be down to do. Okay. So, couple things here, right? Because there's nothing concrete. It's not like Dafne Keen came out and said, well, you'll have to wait and see, summer 2026, just wait and see, and you might just see, Laura return. It's not like she did anything like that. There's no explicit tease here that she's going to be in any future X-Men movies or anything like that, and she's going to be the future Wolverine. I highly doubt that she's going to be the future Wolverine. I think that she, there is some possibility, sure, that she could return to be the MCU's X-23 or version of Laura. Is her last name Kinney? Laura. Anyways, Laura from, the clone of Wolverine. And that's great. I'd be really excited about that. But because Wolverine is such a recognizable and iconic character, I do wonder, if Marvel would want to just recast their own version of James Logan Howlett if they wanted to do that. That's Wolverine. And in terms of Hugh Jackman coming back, I know there are reports and rumors going around that Hugh Jackman wants to play Wolverine until, he's actually 90, like the joke in Deadpool and Wolverine says. I don't see it. I think that if Marvel is going to do X-Men, they really would want to restart. There might be a couple exceptions, maybe Channing Tatum, maybe Dafne Keen. But I look at these comments here, and there's a willingness, right? Dafne Keen seems like, yeah, I definitely want to do an Avengers movie, and I'd love to see Hugh Jackman. But actually, it's because she's saying all these things that I actually almost don't think there are any plans for her to do anything. Because think about it. If she was actually going to be doing these things, then I think it would either be a much more flat denial, like, oh no, definitely not. I would not, be doing those things. Like, yeah, that'd be fun, but I'm not doing those things. Or it would be a more explicit tease of like, oh, maybe that's definitely something that could be happening in the future. What I'm reading into this, and I am very much reading into this, but what I'm looking at here is basically Dafne Keen being asked, wouldn't it be fun if, and of course, anybody who would be in Dafne Keen's place, but just anyone in general would be like, oh, of course. When she's asked, oh, would you want to be Hugh Jackman's replacement? She's like, well, I just like Hugh Jackman, right? And she doesn't even answer the question. So again, there's a lot of ambiguity here. And honestly, this could be just a whole lot of nothing. But I thought it would be a fun, few minutes just to discuss the fact that would we want to see Dafne Keen return? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. I mean, I think Hugh Jackman's coming back for Secret Wars. I have no doubt about that. But, if Hugh Jackman's coming back and if Ryan Reynolds is coming back, which we all assume is going to be the case, just based on, what happened to Deadpool and Thor, right? That has to pay off at some point. But, if those things are going to happen, then yeah, I think it's very likely that Dafne Keen comes back. Whether or not she is the Wolverine of the MCU, I have my doubts. I really do. But guys, let me know in the comments down below, what do you make of Dafne Keen's comments that she'd love to be in the Avengers, which I think she will be. I think she'll be in Avengers Secret Wars. But also, when asked about, are you going to be Hugh Jackman's replacement, she just kind of responds, well, I'd love to just be in a movie with Hugh Jackman again. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, everybody, Red Hulk. That's the end of the segment. No, I'm just kidding. Red Hulk. Red Hulk was a character that I never really wanted to see. I'm going to be honest. I've said this many times before, and, I remember having conversations about this even as early as, Infinity War Endgame, when Thunderbolt Ross was kind of coming back into the MCU. He was coming back in Black Widow, and you were kind of like, oh, are they actually going to be setting up a Red Hulk? And I remember talking to somebody, and he was all excited. He was like, yeah, Red Hulk's going to be so excited. This was like 2018, 2019. He was like, oh, Red Hulk's going to be so exciting. And I was like, am I the only one who doesn't want to see an older man turn into a Red Hulk? Is that just me? Well, flash forward about 6 years, and we are getting a Red Hulk. Not just any old Red Hulk, but one played by the legendary Harrison Ford. And I have to admit, everything I've seen from the trailers has been pretty good regarding the Red Hulk. So, yeah, color me curious, and color me kind of excited just to see Harrison Ford in the MCU. So, doing press for the movie, Harrison Ford has been his usual kind of curmudgeon-y, unserious self on these press tours. I saw an interview with him and Jimmy Kimmel, and it was, as unserious as ever. But I really love that about Harrison Ford these days, because he's just getting to do the rounds, and he's just getting to be a guest actor in these various projects like Shrinking and now Captain America. And it seems like he's genuinely having a good time. Case in point, they just did some interviews with him, and I'm going to read out some quotes that seem to indicate he'd be willing to come back as the Red Hulk. Now, we'll talk about later on in the segment some of my predictions for Captain America Brave New World. And I'm not going to spoil them in this segment, but there is one regarding what I think about the likelihood that Red Hulk is actually going to return in the MCU. So I'm not going to spoil my thoughts on that here, but you can go listen to that later on in the podcast. But anyways, I just wanted to talk about these quotes because I think it's actually really nice to hear this from Harrison Ford. So this is what Harrison Ford had to say when he was asked, is the Red Hulk going to return in the future of the MCU? He says, quote, "I hope he will come back. I hope there's a story in which I can develop into something other than a Red Hulk. I think we have the capacity to shift shapes between Hulkness and humanity, but that's really not my department." He goes on to say, "I was very happy with the opportunity to play in this playground. What an amazing group of people to work with, and what an imaginative reality. So I was looking forward to having a piece of the action." He says later on, quote, "I'd like to think the character was a great fit for me. I was honored to be able to do my work on top of the foundation that was a wonderful actor, William Hurt, provided for the character. And the story is a wonderful extension of the stories that Thunderbolt Ross has been a part of." Okay, that's great. A couple more quotes in this article, and then I have another quote from another article as well. He says, quote, "I've watched Marvel movies and seen actors I really liked, really admired, have a great time. And I thought, hey, I want me some of that." He said that before. It's basically him repeating that quote in various interviews, but he said that before. And then he says, in terms of transforming into the Red Hulk, he says, quote, "I just went for it and nobody stopped me," which is hilarious. That's so funny. And then somebody asked him, can he win in a fight against Mark Ruffalo's Green Hulk? To which he says, and this is so funny to me, quote, "It falls into the who shot first category. So the answer is Greedo." And I'm assuming most of you know what that means here in this channel. But if you don't, you just watch some Star Wars and figure it out, because that's really funny to me. He's been asked about that line and that question to death, who shot first, and it's so funny to me. And then there's another article that I found where I guess it was another set of press, and he talks about the process of becoming Red Hulk. He says, quote, "The process is quite simple. I make faces. They make another face on top of it that fits the face I'm making. Basically, it's just making faces. I didn't know what I was going to do," which I think is really funny, by the way, because the whole process of the motion capture and getting the faces and stuff, and just imagining Harrison Ford in some kind of VFX studio trying to make faces at a camera. Anyways, continuing on, he says, "I didn't know what I was going to do. I was all ready to do something, but nobody gave me any firm instructions. Somehow they just assumed I knew how to become a Red Hulk." Again, it's really funny to me. And then I think the final quote that I'm going to read out here says, quote, "Nobody does this kind of movie except for fun. It's fun. Actors get to act, do silly stuff, but they don't do it silly. They do it sincerely for the audience's pleasure, for expanding the universe, their limits of your imagination. But it's got to have a human context. It's got to have some emotional realities that you can feel what you're seeing. Otherwise, you're just looking at it. Unless you can feel it emotionally, relate to it, it's not useful." Okay. So really, yes, the headline of this segment and sort of the question that we might ask ourselves is, does this mean Harrison Ford is returning for Red Hulk? Does this confirm that he survives the film and whatnot? Again, stay tuned for a later segment later on in the podcast where I talk about my predictions on whether or not we're going to see Red Hulk again. But honestly, I bring this up because I think it's besides the point. What I wanted to talk about is just the fact that it's so good to see Harrison Ford genuinely invested in this. Because, guys, it wasn't so long ago when he was doing press for the Star Wars films, and he was just, the only thing he ever talked about was, "I really wanted them to kill me, kill Han Solo. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I'm done. And then after The Force Awakens came out, he was like, "Yep, that's exactly what I wanted. I want it out. I'm done. No more Star Wars." He was just not happy with it, or whatever the case may be. I think he gave a great performance as Han Solo in The Force Awakens, but it was just clear that he's like, "I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be Han Solo anymore." And I think recently, dare I say, he's found a second lease on his acting life, because I've said this before, and I've made an entire separate segment on this in a separate episode of the Access Blockbusters pod. His work in Shrinking is by far, at least in the 21st century, I think the best work he's ever done. His work in Shrinking is incredible. He is funny. He is heartbreaking. He is, yes, the same curmudgeon-y old Harrison Ford that we all kind of know and love now, but it is incredible acting from a man who is in his 80s now. And I am praying, I know this is a little bit morbid, because again, can't imagine living in a world without Harrison Ford, but if they can just get in Shrinking season 3 before he retires from acting or whatnot, then I would be so grateful, because his work in Shrinking is amazing. And, there's a sense in which I was a little bit worried when they cast Harrison Ford, not because of the acting at all. I knew he was going to give, or at least attempt to give a good performance, because we can get, there's the scenario in which we get a Crystal Skull, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where he was also very clearly like, "I'm done. I don't want to be a part of this anymore." And then he comes back for Dial of Destiny. But anyways, there was a world in which I imagined he came, onto Marvel for Red Hulk, and he was just doing all the junket interviews, and he was like, yeah, they paid me a lot of money and I didn't really want to do it, but they told me I was going to be a Hulk, and I said, whatever. And that would, I think there's a sense in which actors, right, when actors talk and they kind of bash their own work, or they kind of, disparage the audience, right, for lack of a better word, because sometimes there are actors who are like, oh, you're so silly for liking the movie that I was in. Like, why would you even like that? And I've even had friends, who are, I don't want to call them film snobs. That's not fair to them. Like, they're not even big cinephiles or anything like that. They just like the quote unquote more auteur, artistic films. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, those films have their audience and they're held up in high regard for a reason. And then there are people I know who are just only into Oscar movies and stuff like that. And I like a good deal of the Oscar movies that I've seen. They're, a good deal of them I really enjoy. A good deal of them I also really don't enjoy, but that's just my sensibilities, right? And so I've had people, talk to me and be like, that's so stupid that you like these comic book movies and whatnot. Like, they're not actual, to quote the great Martin Scorsese, they're not actual cinema, right? They're not movies. They're, and I just think it's a little disappointing and sad because we don't live in a binary absolute world. We can live in a world where we like both. And so I'm actually so glad to hear that Harrison Ford had a great experience, and he gets it, right? You heard him. He's like, yeah, of course it's silly. Of course showing up to set and making faces at a camera, and then they turn me red and they make me a giant 10-foot monster. That's silly. Of course it's silly. But the sincerity with which it means something to the audience, right? There are people who have waited years. I'm not even kidding. This is not a joke. There are people who probably waited decades to see a Red Hulk on screen. Like, for some people, it's their favorite comic book character. And so, the fact that Harrison Ford understands that sincerity, and yeah, I mean, it's funny when he's like, I hate Star Wars or whatever, but I really am actually appreciative of the fact that he is going so far to say, of course, I'm interested in coming back. And I think that that's actually a really good thing. So whether or not he comes back, we'll have to see. But yeah, I just wanted to bring this up because I think it's awesome. I think it's just great to see Harrison Ford, and I'm excited to see him in Captain America: Brave New World very, very soon. What do you guys think of Harrison Ford's comments about playing the Red Hulk? Do you guys think it's a good thing, or do you guys think it's whatever it is? You talk too long about Harrison Ford being not as grumpy, and that's fair. I talked a while about that, but let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. Armor Wars has been in development purgatory for a long, long time. First, it was announced, and I think it was announced with that original, do you guys remember that original Disney's investors call where I think they announced the cast of Thor: Love and Thunder, the Marvels, they talked about Secret Invasion, which, eventually did come out, and they talked about all these different projects, and they also brought up this little project called Armor Wars. I actually believe also, side note, that was the first time we got our announcement of a Fantastic Four movie coming out, which was really exciting. And lo and behold, we are just mere months, less than half a year away from Fantastic Four, which is so exciting. We just got our first trailer, which we'll obviously be talking about later on in this episode. But anyways, Armor Wars has been in limbo for quite a while. And we got, we've been getting rumors, right, and reports from, people who are sometimes reputable, sometimes not. I haven't really talked about it because the reports are that, well, it's not happening anytime soon. And so I've been waiting, let's just wait and see if we get any official confirmation, at least for something like this, where there's not a whole lot to talk about other than it's not happening for a while. But we actually just did get confirmation because Nate Moore, who's been doing, I guess, press for Captain America: Brave New World, he is one of the producers for Marvel Studios. Remember, he's actually been one of the higher-up producers for Marvel Studios. And not only that, he is actually leaving the MCU as a full-time executive producer to do other things, but he will still be executive producing Black Panther 3, which he talked about. And that's where we got our official confirmation that Black Panther 3 is happening sometime soon. So Nate Moore is, doing comments, doing press and whatnot. And he was asked about Armor Wars, interestingly enough. And he gave this quote, which is, I think it's interesting. It's interesting. So let's talk about it here. He says, quote, that's not my project, to be honest. But I do know, as Marvel continues to go through this phase, we want to make sure whatever we're making is awesome. So that means we had to slow down some things that were on the front burner. It doesn't mean we'll never make it, but it does mean we just have to be a little more considered so that every time out, audiences are guaranteed quality. Okay, couple interesting things here because again, I didn't want to talk about a rumor that Armor Wars wasn't happening for a while because that we all kind of figured that. But this is interesting because it's coming directly from a producer from Marvel Studios. So first of all, first point of interest here. This is not my project. What this speaks to me is the fact that there has been, because of the increased output at Marvel Studios, where before Kevin Feige was overseeing 3 movies a year, right? And he could do it. I'm sure he obviously had his executive producers, Victoria Alonso, who has since left. Louis D'Esposito is still there as, I guess, the president or co-president or whatever, because Kevin Feige is the CEO of Marvel Studios. I don't know. It's complicated. But anyways, so we have that, and then, we had Nate Moore, obviously, as another producer, and then other people as well. But yeah, I mean, the fact that he says that's not my project means there is some kind of compartmentalization going on within Marvel. And I guess on the one hand, it's a little concerning, right? Because it's like, oh, part of the joy of the MCU, if you rewatch the Infinity Saga, which, God bless you if you do. It's going to take you a long time. We did that here on the channel a while ago. Anyways, it's going to take you a while, but what you're going to find, and what impresses me every single time, is the fact that it's so interconnected. Every movie, or almost every movie, had some references or something, that was from the film directly preceding it, which is amazing, right? That is incredible, because those movies were in production simultaneously. That's how movie making works. It's not like, oh, just because a movie comes out 6 months apart, 2 movies come out 6 months apart means that they had nothing to do with one. Like, it was staggered productions. They were in production simultaneously, So the fact that you could set up all of Black Panther and then have Wakanda be such a big part of Avengers Infinity War, a film that came out basically 2 months after Black Panther, is incredible. That kind of synergy. But it looks like that's just not the case. And we've seen that in the end product as well in the MCU, that, well, yes, I think that some things in the MCU's Phase 4 and Phase 5 have been pretty good. There hasn't been a lot of interconnectivity in that same way, where it's like, yeah, I mean, WandaVision has nothing to do with the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, has nothing to do with Loki, has nothing to do with Black Widow, has nothing to do with Shang-Chi, nothing to do with Eternals. There's not that kind of synergy going on, which I think is it's indicative of maybe a problem going on with Marvel, even as they continue to try to up the quality again. So I think that that's an interesting thing to note here in these comments. The other interesting thing, or a couple other interesting things, is, the fact that he says it was on the front burner. So it means that it definitely was on the fast track to being made, which makes sense, because it was at the time when, again, output was king, right? Make as much stuff as you possibly can. But the final interesting thing, again, other than the fact that he's like, we want to make good stuff, which is great, I think that re-emphasis on quality is always a good thing. But the other interesting thing is that he makes the caveat that it's not my project, so I don't have the most insight into it. But he says, quote, it doesn't mean we'll never make it. And then he goes on to talk about, the quality. But that seems to indicate they may not make it at all. It's ironic, right? Because by him saying, well, my comments don't mean we'll never make it, like it just because we put it on the back burner doesn't mean we'll never make it, actually kind of seems to indicate to me there is a distinct possibility they may not make it. Just by implying that there is a possibility, right? And I think that that's an interesting twist here, because it's not like, I for whatever reason, Blade has been delayed over and over and over again, but every single time that Feige or the producers are asked about it, they're adamant. They're adamant. They're like, no, we're going to make this movie. But with Armor Wars, the tone's a little different, don't you think? It's almost like, yeah, I mean, we'll probably get to it. And so it makes me a little curious, a little bit worried, because I do like Rhodey. I don't know if I'd be super excited about an Armor Wars movie, to be quite honest with you, until I see the premise, until I see, what the show, or the movie, excuse me, because it used to be a show. It was going to be a show, and now it's going to be a movie. But until I see what the premise is going to be about, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of curious to see where this project goes. Is it going to turn into Blade, where maybe eventually it comes out? And again, we don't even know if Blade's going to come out at all. Or is it just going to quietly fade into the distance? We don't know. And again, Nate Moore is he says it himself. He's not the person most qualified to talk about it, but we'll have to see about that. Guys, do you think at this point that Armor Wars is going to come out, or do you think that it's just going to quietly disappear, kind of like, the Avengers dusted in Thanos' snap? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, everybody. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, the first 2 episodes, probably some of the biggest surprises I've ever seen, because I had 0 expectation for this show. In fact, I had less than 0 expectation for the show. I've made segments in the past talking about the trailers, talking about the show in general, and look, I mean, I'm willing to give anything a chance, but I watched the show, or I watched the trailers rather, and I was like, what is this? What's the point of this? It doesn't look like it's really much of anything, and that is what it is, right? It's all right to not like trailers and stuff like that, but I always go into these shows and go into these movies with an open mind, because that is exactly the best way, I think, to make the most out of your viewing experiences, I mean, I think one of the better experiences when watching movies and shows is to really not be excited by something and then end up really liking it. And Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, the first 2 episodes, it was exactly that. I really liked them. So I went into the next week, which is now this week, and I was like, okay, let's see what we got here. And little did I know, I must have seen the release schedule. I know they released it in some Instagram post or something like that, but they released 3 episodes this week. So I had a little bit of watching to do. It's like 30 minutes each episode, which is like 22 minutes-ish. It's like a sitcom length episode of every single episode. So it's almost an hour and a half of TV, which is fun. And yeah, here we are. We're going to talk about the first 3 episodes 3 through 5, rather, of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. This is going to be a full spoiler discussion, so if you have not seen Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, just make sure to come back later, and we will be discussing them. I'm not going to go as in-depth, because again, I don't think this is, it's not as big of a show as Skeleton Crew or The Penguin or anything like that, so we're not going to go as in-depth on these episodes as we do with those spoiler discussions, but I still want to hit and highlight some of the better moments and some things that I really enjoyed from these 3 episodes 3, 4, and 5. So let's get into it, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Episode 3, we start out here. And yeah, the end of episode 2, I kind of predicted it. I kind of thought so while we were watching episode 2. I was like, Norman Osborn's going to figure out who Peter Parker is. And sure enough, that's how episode 2 ended. And so we get an interesting dynamic here between Peter and Norman. And it's interesting because Norman, played by the amazing Coleman Domingo, who is nominated rather for an Oscar for his performance in Sing Sing. He's incredible. He's great. He plays Norman really well in this voice acting role. He's scary, but he's also kind of inviting, which is different. It's different than the relationship between Tony and Peter, even Quentin Beck and Peter in Spider-Man Far From Home. I think Quentin was genuinely, or not genuinely, but trying to play genuine nice up until the very moment he betrays Peter. So I think that this is different, because I think there is a layer of cynicism, or a layer of seriousness, and I wouldn't say evil. I don't know. It's hard to tell. I suspect at this point in the show that Norman Osborn is already up to some very nefarious things. So it's not like I don't think he's going to make a big turn later on in the series and then he's going to become Green Goblin. I'm not saying he's Green Goblin right now. I just think that, as Norman Osborn, he's up to some shady things. But yeah, he plays scary but inviting really well. He actually kind of gives big Vulture vibes. Vulture is like, hey, look, you saved my daughter and I'm never going to forget that. So you walk away, otherwise I'm going to kill you. And it's kind of that kind of vibe, and so yeah, Peter did save Harry, and so it's really listen, I want to pay you back. I want to do whatever I can to help you, which is, I think, yeah, it makes sense. So again, it's interesting. The question is, what's in it for Norman, other than the fact that he saved his son, and it doesn't seem like he cares for Harry all too much. There's a quick a line of dialogue, quick blink and you'll miss it line, where towards, I think it's episode 5, at the end of episode 5, he's like, Harry here is 15, and Harry's like, I'm 16. So it kind of shows you Norman is not the most caring father, right? And he's treating Peter pretty well, but it brings up the question of what is it, or what's in it for Norman. And I think that's what will be kind of the big talking point throughout the entire show, is that I think at the end of the show we'll get the villain reveal, and then we'll see where he goes from here. So anyways, Peter's like, yeah, I don't know if I can do this anymore. My identity's been revealed, and I don't want to be at Oscorp because it's my identity's compromised. And Norman's like, okay, but how about a lot of money? And look, I mean, it's not a trivial thing, right? The Peter Parker that's being portrayed here, and in most iterations of the comic books, is not well off, and money talks, and especially seeing later on May is clearing up a bunch of Uncle Ben stuff, and poor Aunt May, right? I mean, this is, I guess Uncle Ben must have died right before the start of the show, and so it must be really hard, and yeah, I mean, again, all the little scenes in this show, nothing feels wasted, which I really like. Nothing feels like a scene just for the sake of a scene. Everything feels intentional. I think that's a really good sign of a good show. Anyways, Peter is now at Oscorp, and he's decided to stay, and things are going well for Peter. And Lonnie, Lonnie, he's a compelling character as well. And there are moments, right, where you are rooting for Lonnie, but then you're kind of like, but you know that something bad is about to happen. And the poor guy, I mean, he just can't catch a break throughout this series so far, where even at lunch, he's like, hey, Peter and Pearl, I'll buy you guys lunch. And then he realizes that he doesn't have enough money for it. And so it's just, he's a tragic character. And I obviously towards the end of it, he's starting to embrace his villain role, but I just feel bad for him because he's a likable character. At the beginning, you were kind of like, uh-oh, here we go. Jock character who's trying to take away Peter's girlfriend kind of deal, because it seemed like at least that they were going down that road of Peter and Pearl kind of being the Peter and Liz from Spider-Man Homecoming. But it seems like, well, maybe they're going a different route here, because Lonnie is a genuinely good guy. He's a great person who is just in the wrong set of circumstances. And really impressed with how the show is taking time to flesh out Lonnie. I think it's going to be, such a tragic fall from grace once he actually starts to break out as the villain. And the tragedy begins in episode 3, where he joins that group, the 100 and something gang, and he takes the place of his brother, which is, it's really sad here. And so anyways, at the end of the show, also there are 2 random criminals with some tech that I guess later is revealed to be from Otto Octavius, we think. And, the action's pretty good. I don't know who these criminals are. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, at the end of the episode as well, there's a quick scene of Norman seemingly monitoring the whole thing. So it seems like he is sanctioning all this, although it also seems like later Otto Octavius is not aware or not in league with Norman. So it's interesting. At the end of this episode, Lonnie and Spider-Man both kind of headed down shady paths. Lonnie with the gang and Spider-Man with Norman Osborn. So we'll see where that goes from there. Episode 4. The professor. It starts out at the lab again in Oscorp. The professor is just cruel. That guy was just yelling at everybody. What a cruel professor. I've never seen anybody like that. That's crazy. A little cartoonish for sure, but yeah, kind of crazy. I also really like, though, that they are bringing back the MCU references, because it seems like an Earth that's sort of adjacent to the MCU. We saw Doctor Strange. We're going to see Daredevil later on as well. I think Kingpin is going to show up as well. So the Sokovia Accords are being brought up, which is great. That's awesome. I also wonder, because, in this universe, right, they're playing the Civil War moments in parallel. We see a little glimpse of the airport battle on a TV screen, which is interesting. I wonder if Tony ever looked for Spider-Man in this universe. I suppose not, because in this universe, the whole scene was mirrored by Norman Osborn. We get a whole little montage here of all the different suits that Norman Osborn is giving him. The medieval suit is kind of funny. And eventually he lands on the white Spider-Man suit, which, looks kind of like Iron Spider, but it's white. There's that. We are also spending some more time at school. I really like Lonnie and Pearl. Again, their chemistry, it's cute, and she has no idea what's going on. And it's really sad. We're also introduced to the Scorpions, the other gang, which is led by Matt Gargan, who I'm sure probably from Otto Octavius will get his Scorpion suit, but he's definitely going to play a big role in the rest of the series. I really like actually how, this series is taking full advantage of Spider-Man's rogues gallery, because, I mean, Spider-Man, he has one of the most extensive rogues galleries in all of comic book history, and you got to take advantage of it, right? We've seen Norman Osborn, Harry Osborn, who are not villains yet, but I'm sure they will be. Scorpion, Tombstone, we see a version of Rhino, I think, in episode 5. And Dr. Octopus is in there. So and Dr. Connors, the lizard, I don't think she's a lizard yet, but she will be, maybe. I don't know, maybe not. But yeah, I love that we're taking advantage of the full roster of characters that Spider-Man has at his disposal, which is really, really good. And also, what's interesting, speaking of other superheroes, is that Norman Osborn, kind of explains his motivation behind all of this. And he's like, or behind supporting Spider-Man, he's like, look, it's an arms race, right? Because you have the Avengers, right? But who's gonna, stop the Avengers if they go rogue? Like, he says something like, we're one bad Hulk incident away from just being in terror. And he's got a point. I really like the MCU connections there. It's really good. And then at the end of the episode, Harry finds out that Peter is Spider-Man. So we head into episode 5, and Doc Ock, we get introduced to Doc Ock, the very comic book accurate Doc Ock with a little bowl cut on his head, which is interesting. And then we get some more scenes between Harry or Norman, who I'm still wondering if they're going to turn into Goblin. I guess Harry and Peter are becoming good friends here, and Harry, at least for now, is playing the role of the friend. He's the dude at the desk instead of Ned's guy in the chair, which I think is funny. Although I did miss Ned. I really like Ned and Peter. But anyways, we get a lot more development here with Lonnie as well. And we get the 2 parallel fights between Spider-Man and this Rhino. I think it's supposed to be Rhino, right? Some version of Rhino. And she's wearing the helmet. And then we get Lonnie and fighting the Scorpions. And those scenes in parallel, the action is really well, the action is animated pretty well, the fight scenes. Also, though, keep, making sure to ground the story and Peter's friends, Peter's relationships. I really like the ending where, you kind of think, oh, it's so sweet. Peter meets up with Nico, and then, of course, it's ruined because Peter Parker is a really well-meaning character in most iterations. Super well-meaning, really nice kid, but sometimes he's clueless. And inviting Harry Osborn, he means well, but he just didn't read the room. And poor Nico at the end of the episode. Poor Nico. So, guys, episodes 3 through 5 of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, I'm really enjoying the show. It's, even if I wasn't doing this for you, even if I wasn't reviewing these episodes or doing spoiler discussions for them on the YouTube channel, I'd still really be enjoying it. I think it's solid, and it's showing how expansive the universe of Spider-Man characters are, and it's really showcasing the best parts of Peter Parker as a character. You know, his humanity, his genuineness, but his also overeagerness, and the quips are fun. You know, the working with Norman Osborn is fun, and I think that this is a really solid show. So I'm excited. You know, if this is what MCU animation can be, I'm down for it. You know, multiverse animation or whatever. You know, like somewhat of a parallel universe. Because honestly, like, if you're going to make shows like this, great. You know, I think I heard it was renewed for 2 more seasons after this, which is great if the show is going to be this good. And why were we doing What If in the first place? I mean, again, that's just me. I really didn't like What If, but yeah, I'm really liking this show, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. So guys, what did you think of episodes 3 through 5 of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man? Are you enjoying the show, or maybe you're not? Let me know in the comments down below. Alright guys, well, the DCEU is dead. Surprise, no, that's been old news, but the DCU is coming. Or at least it's already here, but, you know, it's coming in full force in July with Superman. And we're going to get some more promo from it soon, and, you know, there's a lot to get excited about, a lot to look forward to. Lanterns, Peacemaker, Supergirl, all of that good stuff. But one project that has been, I guess, quietly brewing in development for a little bit, because we've gotten some new updates about it, is an animated Blue Beetle project. Now, Blue Beetle, right, was one of the last projects in the DCEU starring Joel Duena. And he played Blue Beetle. The film, it seemed mostly separate from the DCEU, although it took place in that continuity, I suppose. But, you know, this was the new version of Blue Beetle, Jaime Reyes. And it's similar to how Ant-Man took their approach of not doing Hank Pym, but doing Hank Pym as the mentor, and then Scott Lang being Ant-Man, you know, with Ted Kord being missing from Blue Beetle. So there was that. But Blue Beetle came out, and it made barely any money. It really, 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 really tanked at the box office. And again, we talked about this when we were talking about Andy Muschietti's comments about why The Flash failed. There were many reasons why Blue Beetle didn't make a lot of money at the box office. One, you know, primarily being the DCEU was just on life support. It was dying. It was on its last legs. And so, you know, people had just given up on the DCEU, and it wasn't really marketed too heavily. You know, it was going to go to Max originally, just straight to Max, but they decided to put it in theaters. And to be fair to Blue Beetle, critically, it did okay. I think it's, you know, it has a decent critical rating and all that kind of stuff. People generally seem to like it. I, you know, personally, right? I was one of the people who came out of Blue Beetle, one of the few, I suppose. And I was like, I just didn't like the movie. And eventually in our DCE rewatch series, you know, where I post some other separate episodes about, you know, each individual DCEU project, we're usually posting those in between regularly scheduled episodes of the Access Blockbusters pod when I'm not available to record live episodes. But, you know, we'll eventually get to Blue Beetle. We're on Wonder Woman right now, so we have a long way to go. We'll eventually get there. But, you know, my original viewing experience of Blue Beetle was not super positive. I just didn't like the film that much. I thought the villains were really, really terrible. And I, you know, for the most part, just thought it was kind of a generic-ish kind of film. And so anyways, all that aside, this isn't about my thoughts on Blue Beetle. We'll talk about Blue Beetle somewhere else down the line. But Joel Duena then later confirmed, once the DCEU had officially ended and once the DCU was starting to get going, that he actually would be back in DC as Blue Beetle. The question became, okay, was he going to be the DCU's Blue Beetle? Was he just going to come back, you know, in some capacity, but we weren't sure how? And was it going to be in a movie? Was he going to be part of the Booster Gold project? And so now, Joel Duena, who is, I believe, promoting Cobra Kai, he's a part of Cobra Kai, was at the Saturn Awards, and the Direct got to interview him, and they actually asked him what's going on with this Blue Beetle project, because it was announced, I think James Gunn was the one who said they're going to be doing an animated Blue Beetle project. So, Direct said, quote, this is a back and forth between them. Direct says, quote, "It's a crime that we haven't seen Blue Beetle for as long as it's been." Jolo says, "Hey man, arrest me." He laughs. "I'm ready to come back. We're hitting hard the animated project, hoping to get this settled out this year to show everyone next year." And then there's another interaction where the Direct says, "Have you talked to Gunn at all about, like, hey, animated is great, this is going to be awesome, but when am I going to put the suit on again for real, though?" And Jolo says, "Look, he's got his hands in the kitchen. I don't want to walk in while the chef is doing his thing, but I can say that once they're finished with this 3-course meal, I'm ready. And look, I have no reason to believe that he's lying." He goes on to say, sorry, this quote is kind of long. He goes on to say, "Like whatever, we're adults. Say whatever you want to say." He laughs again. "I'm just happy to have done this first one, and I'll continue to spread the word about that while we get the second one drafted up." So this little back and forth here between the Direct and Jolo seems to confirm a couple things, to me at least. Number one, I think it pretty much confirms that this Blue Beetle will be a part of the DCU, because that is a question, right? Like, they might be just doing stuff. They have a Harley Quinn show that's going on, season 5, which, by the way, Harley Quinn's really fun show. But yeah, I mean, they have other things going on in Elseworld. So, the thought was, is this animated film or show? Sorry, I think it's a show, right? Yeah, animated show. Is this just going to be a one-off kind of thing where they bring back Jolo to do something fun, and then, they don't really have him come back in the DCU? But it looks like from Jolo's comments that, no, he's, talked with James Gunn, and there are plans to bring him into the live-action universe, which, again, seems to indicate DCU. It's just not going to happen as of yet. The other really interesting thing is it looks like this project is much further along in development than we thought. Now, Jolo could just be saying this, right? He could just be saying, oh yeah, I want to get to it this year, and then we're going to start next year, or we're going to have it out next year. That might be wishful thinking, and it wouldn't be the first time that an actor, says something and tries to put it out in the universe and it doesn't really go that way. Like, how many times have we seen actors and directors go, oh yeah, I'm really excited for this project, hopefully we're going to get it out next year, but then it's not actually up to them, right? It's up to the studio, it's up to James Gunn in this case, it's up to DC. So it's interesting, right? Because that could be the case, but it seems like he has he seems like he has an idea of what the production timeline is for this project. At least he thinks that they're going to get to it this year, and maybe it's just his best guess that they're going to release it next year. So again, is this a DCU project? I don't know. I think so. Like, I think all indications are that, but we haven't heard anything about this project other than now when Jolo is like, yeah, no, it's going to come out next year, because James Gunn seems to have his slate pretty set. He's like, yeah, we're going to do, we did Creature Commandos, we're going to do Superman, we're going to do Peacemaker Season 2, then Lanterns and Supergirl, and he's been pretty quiet about everything else. I think that, the Clayface movie, I think, is going to come out in 2026 as well, but otherwise just been pretty quiet. So is Blue Beetle, whatever this animated series, is that going to be a part of that slate? It's hard to say. But I think that, it's encouraging, because look, I didn't love Blue Beetle. I just mentioned that earlier. But I don't think Jolo was the problem with Blue Beetle. I think, actually, to me, Jolo was kind of similar to Shang-Chi, to Simu Liu's acting in Shang-Chi, where I don't think they're the best. Like, they're not going to give Oscar caliber performances, and they're very capable of growing into that. But in Blue Beetle and in Shang-Chi, those two actors who, again, came from kind of, I haven't seen Cobra Kai, to be fair, but I know Simu Liu came from Kim's Convenience, right? It's a very sitcom kind of show. And he fit the MCU mold. They both fit the MCU mold very well, of just like, or the superhero mold. Not both MCU, one DCE, one MCU. They fit the mold pretty well, right? Of just, action-oriented, being able to deliver those one-liners, being able to hold a film up, but, not necessarily overpower it. They did really well in those roles. I think that Simu Liu was really helped, right? Because Shang-Chi, I love Shang-Chi. What a great movie. But for me, Blue Beetle was not helping Jolo at all. But I don't think Jolo himself was the problem with it. So I'd be interested to see him come back as Blue Beetle, and it looks like we're going to be getting that much sooner than we thought. Guys, what do you think about this? Do you think Blue Beetle, an animated series, is going to be coming out in 2026, or do you think that this is just wishful thinking on Jolo's part? Because we will get it eventually, it seems like. But it remains to be seen whether or not it's going to come out in 2026. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. So we have a little bit of information on this upcoming Vision series. For those of you who don't know, Marvel obviously has been releasing their Disney Plus shows in conjunction with their MCU movies. We have Captain America Brave New World coming out very, very, very soon. But they've also been releasing TV shows, and yes, they've been releasing a lot of these TV shows. In fact, to the chagrin of many, because a lot of these TV shows have not lived up to the quality that we've been used to for the MCU. However, it looks like with Kevin Feige getting his authority back, there's a whole political drama, not political in the actual politics sense, but sort of inside politics kind of thing going on with Disney. There was a fascinating New York Times article about Bob Chapek and Bob Iger. Long story short, Kevin Feige was told, put out as much content as you possibly can, and now he basically has his authority back, and now he's able to make stuff that he really deems to be quality. So, looks like, though, interestingly enough, the Vision series, which I would have thought would have been part of that original wave of just throw everything against the wall. I thought Agatha all along was like that too, and maybe it was. To be fair, maybe these series were greenlit under those conditions, but maybe, Kevin Feige really saw the potential in them, and he's like, yeah, let's keep going. And now we have another cast member. So I would not have honestly talked about this new casting if it was just the cast member, because I'm going to be honest with you guys, I've never heard of this person before. And really, I mean, if it was like, hey, character or actor is just cast in a role and that's it, I mean, which is pretty much what's going on here. But, normally I would have been like, yeah, we'll talk about it another time. Because, I mean, we've talked about castings like, Creme of the Yellow Hills. I don't know who that actor is, Matthias Schoenaerts, but he's going to be the main villain. Okay, great. We cast Ulrich Thompson, who, again, I've never heard of before, but he's going to be Sinestro. This is a big deal, right? These are big deals. We talked about Farhan Tahir coming back as Raza in the MCU from Iron Man. So, again, big deal. In this Vision series, by the way. But the reason I want to bring up this casting here is because Deadline is reporting, right, that Vision, the Vision series, is going to be adding a person with another name I just cannot pronounce, Rorid. I, again, totally butchered that name. I apologize. It's not my intention to do so. I'm going to say Rorid Malika is cast in the Marvel series for Disney+. And the details with this is, are the accompanying details, are that he's been a part of HBO's The Franchise, and he's been cast as a series regular. And then on top of that, they actually have a couple more details about the Vision series, but it's kind of what we knew. This is from Deadline saying, quote, "The new series is believed to follow Vision, Bettany, as he tries to regain his memory and humanity." Duh. I mean, I think we could have all figured that one out. So nothing surprising there. The only reason I thought this would be interesting, remotely interesting to talk about, again, no offense to Malika, because he might be a fantastic actor, great guy. I've never, seen anything that he's been in, I don't think. So I don't know. The only reason I bring this up is because do we think there's any remote possibility that he is Tommy? Now, I personally do not subscribe to the theory that the entire Vision series is going to be about Vision looking for Tommy or whatever, and then at the end of the show, Billy and Tommy are going to reunite, and Agatha's going to be a big part of it. But I would also, I think, be a little bit ignorant if I didn't at least acknowledge there was a possibility that Vision, the Vision show was at least a little bit about Tommy or at least, would include Tommy Maximoff. Because if we're gonna say that WandaVision, Agatha all along, and the Vision show are kind of, interconnected in a certain way within the MCU, which again, that hasn't been confirmed. What we've heard is different people saying, well, they're part of a trilogy. But it's not like, Kevin Feige has come out to the WandaVision trilogy of shows. It's just sort of a convention, right? To say that they've all kind of spun out from the same origin story. But again, I mean, to say that they're not, there isn't some through line through all of them, because again, this is a character that came directly out of WandaVision. This is a Vision made out of basically the spare parts of the dead Vision and imbued with memory from a hallucination from Wanda Maximoff. So it's all coming from WandaVision, right? So is there any possibility that this actor is playing Tommy? He's 25 years old. Which is, I think, 4 years older than the actor playing Billy Maximoff, right? So it's possible. Joe Locke, I totally slipped on his name. Joe Locke playing Billy Maximoff, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is it possible? Sure. And for those of you in the comments being like, does he look like him or whatever? I don't think that really has any bearing on it, to be honest with you. I mean, sure, like somewhat resembling, maybe, but I've seen plenty of movies and shows where the child actor doesn't look remotely like the adult actor later on in the film when they flash forward. And I don't think it really matters too much, honestly. Also, people change, people look different. So anyways, I don't think it, matters that they don't cast. Like, I think that the actor they cast as the child, Billy Maximoff, doesn't look too terribly much like Joe Locke, but, I think they cast Joe Locke and he did a good job. So, yeah, I think it's fine. But anyways, it's just, I don't know. I'm just randomly throwing this out here. Do we think that this is Tommy? I don't think this is an indication either way, but I just thought it's a kind of interesting thing, because every time Vision casts somebody new, and that, that actor happens to be a young, male actor in his early 20s, it kind of makes you wonder, is this, could this be? So we'll have to wait and see. We won't get any specific confirmation probably for a while, whether or not Malika is playing, Tommy Maximoff, or if he's just playing some other random guy. Actually, the other confirmation, I should have said this at the top of this, is that he's playing a character named Tucker, which again, Billy was teen, right, for the whole show, which we all knew he was Billy Maximoff, but they call him Teen. So it could be a similar thing, I think, well, in Agatha all along, Tommy, I guess the spirit of Tommy or whatever possesses a boy who was drowning, and that boy could have been named Tucker, who knows, and Tucker, Tommy, so I don't know. Also William, right? I think the guy who Billy Maximoff possesses, his name is William, so it could be a similar thing. Anyways, I'm just going off on a wild theory here. But guys, let me know in the comments, do you think that this casting is significant in terms of, and again, no offense meant to Malika, I just haven't seen anything he's in, but significant in the sense of, is he playing a significant MCU character, or do we think this is someone who we probably haven't heard of before and he's just going to be a series regular? Let me know in the comments down below. All right, guys, so we talked a little bit ago about the fact that Sadie Sink was rumored to be cast as Jean Grey, or at least the frontrunner for Jean Grey. And we talked about the implications there. And now the narrative continues to build. To be fair, right? To be fair, the person who reported that Sadie Sink was the frontrunner for Jean Grey was Jeff Snyder. And I've said this before on the channel, but in case you're new to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, which again, if you are, welcome, or the Access Blockbusters pod, depending on where you're listening. But again, if you're new, welcome. But one thing that we talk about here a lot is the fact that we have to check the sources, right? We have to check the reputability of these sources and kind of figure out where we go from there. And so the interesting thing about, the movie industry, or at least the movie news industry, is the fact that there's a kind of a hierarchy, right? We look at Hollywood Reporter and Deadline and Variety as kind of the, set in stone, right? These are the things that, if it says it's going to happen this way, then we probably take that to the bank. And that's all fine. And then there are these reporters like Jeff Snyder or Christian Harloff or whatever, but I think Jeff Snyder is probably, a tier above Christian Harloff, for example, or John Campea, where Jeff Snyder's generally right, but he's gotten some things wrong, but he's generally right. So he's reported some things, and he was the one who reported that Sadie Sink was the front runner for Jean Grey. And then he is now reporting again that we have another MCU casting, and this time it's going to be none other than Kitty Pryde. So according to Jeff Snyder, we have Kitty Pryde being cast, who is going to be played by an actress named Julia Butters. Now, what's interesting about this, right, is that Julia Butters is 15 years old. And as an actress, I mean, even for an actress, right, because there are very young, actresses out there, but even for an actress, she is very, very young. That being said, she is also, apparently, because I haven't seen her in anything, very, very talented, because she has been in films like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and also The Gray Man, which I believe The Gray Man was directed by the Russo brothers, so there's some familiarity. By the way, we'll talk about in a separate segment, because I think this other piece of X-Men news that he drops about the production schedule is, I think, interesting enough to warrant its own segment. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But for those of you who are saying, or for those of you who've been seeing the rumors that, the Russo brothers are going to direct the X-Men films, well, one can't be true. Or both can't be true. Both the Russos directing the X-Men film and X-Men coming out in 2027, because the Russos are kind of busy with Avengers Secret Wars, and guys, the production schedules of movies are crazy. You cannot do that. Like, you cannot be directing two movies that come out 2 months apart unless you had directed them a long time ago back to back, right? It's just not possible. So no, they're not directing X-Men, or X-Men's not coming out in 2027. Both can't be true. Anyways, getting back to this news. So Jeff Snyder reiterates that, yes, Sadie Sink is the frontrunner for Jean Grey. Julia Butters is apparently cast, I guess, as Kitty Pryde, according to Jeff Snyder. And they also, this was a rumor that came out a while ago that I didn't really talk about because, honestly, it kind of skipped over me. But apparently also they have a frontrunner for Cyclops, who is an actor named Harris Dickinson, who was in the Iron Claw and Baby Girl. So again, I haven't seen anything that he's been in, but again, these are, what you're seeing here now is a theme. And look, we always have to say this with these reports. These could be completely false. How many times did we hear all the scoopers say, and again, I know Jeff Snyder is a little bit more reputable than your average scooper, or even your above average scooper, but how many times did we hear all these reports of Adam Driver confirmed as Reed Richards, Margot Robbie confirmed as Sue Storm, all these different castings that were going on here, and none of that happened. None of that happened. We'll talk about my thoughts on the actual casting of the Fantastic Four when we talk about the trailer in just a little bit. But guys, none of that happened. So this is fun, right? It's fun to say, and this could be true. Like, in a few months, we might officially get the cast of the new X-Men film at San Diego Comic-Con, and Harris Dickinson might come on stage, Sadie Sink might come on stage, and Julia Butters might come on stage, and we might be like, oh yeah, okay, solid, But it could be completely wrong. So just want to put that out there. Let's assume it's true. Let's assume this is true. It's continuing the theme that we talked about before. You're getting very talented actors and very talented actresses, right? These are, young actresses, and that's the second theme that we'll talk about in just a second, but these are young actors and actresses who have been in really good things. They're not casting complete unknowns, which is, again, totally fine if they do. I mean, for example, Iman Vellani, I think, did a great job as Ms. Marvel, and she had barely been in anything, right? So it's not like that in itself is a recipe for disaster, but I think that what you're seeing here is that the emphasis on the X-Men, the young X-Men, we got to get it right. We got to cast the most talented young actors and actresses out there. And these are, people who are going to be playing these roles for a long time, because the second point I think to notice from here is that these are young actors and actresses. I thought casting Sadie Sink, and again, the assumption is the X-Men aren't going to be happening for a little bit, although it's sooner than you think, according to Jeff Snyder, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. But again, still not for a little bit. So even if they're cast now, it's still going to be a couple years, right? But Sadie Sink being in her early 20s, and Harris Dickinson, I think, is a little bit older. I think he's in his late 20s, like 28 or so. So he'll be like 30, if the X-Men film comes out. But, I mean, Julia Butters, 15 years old. I don't think she's going to be an adult if the X-Men film is rumored to come out when it is going to come out. So, again, casting young, right? To have these characters hopefully be foundational for whatever comes next into the MCU, whether it's, the Avengers versus X-Men versus Eternals thing that just happened, Judgment Day, or if it's just Avengers versus X-Men, or if it's Apocalypse, or whatever is going to happen next in the MCU, Annihilation, who knows? But just being able to cast the next wave of the MCU, because again, Avengers, right? The Avengers typically, and we're not talking about young Avengers, we're not talking about champions, but the Avengers typically are made up of adults, even older adults, right? Like Tony Stark is not young in the comic books, and Robert Downey Jr. was not young when he played Iron Man for the first time. And by the time the Avengers Endgame ended, he was a dad, right? MCU Tony Stark was a dad. So, they were able to build a foundation for that, but it lasted about 10 years. These kids theoretically could be playing these characters for like 15 years if that's where the MCU wanted to go. So anyways, I just think it's interesting. We'll continue to monitor this, but file this away under interesting information, and we'll see where we go from there. What do you guys think? Do you think, first of all, have you seen anything that Julia Butters has been in, and what did you think about her in those roles? But more importantly, what do you think about just the general themes that have been coming out from these rumored, I have to say rumored and reported castings for the MCU's X-Men? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. So jumping off of that, report that we just talked about casting the young X-Men in the future of the MCU. And speaking of the future of the MCU, this same report from Jeff Snyder, and again, I think it was interesting and relevant enough to separate out into a separate segment, because I think there is actually a lot more to talk about here, which we touched on in the previous segment, talking about Kitty Pryde and Julia Butters. But there is another detail, another little nugget here in this Jeff Snyder report, and it's about the release date of the upcoming X-Men reboot. So just to kind of catch people up to speed, if you guys weren't aware, the X-Men used to belong to a completely separate studio, 20th Century Fox. Then in 2019, Disney bought 20th Century Fox, and all of a sudden the X-Men were back under Marvel's banner. That being said, Kevin Feige at the time was asked about, when are the X-Men coming? And he was like, no, we have a plan. We're going to stick to our plan. And we usually have it mapped out maybe about 5 years in advance. So you're not going to see the X-Men or the mutants start to pop up until about 5 years later. 5 years later, and also given a pandemic and given a writers and actors strike, we are starting to see mutants, right? We saw Charles Xavier in Doctor Strange 2, but he wasn't really, he wasn't really a mutant, but we saw Kamala Khan be a mutant in 2022's Ms. Marvel. So again, we're starting to see the mutants show up here and there, and Feige has indicated that mutants will be showing up in the 2025 films in various places, in Captain America, Thunderbolt, or Fantastic Four, or maybe all of them. So anyways, now we're heading full steam ahead, and the assumption for a while, though nobody has explicitly said it, I don't think, is that the phase or the saga after the multiverse saga, which is what we're in right now, is going to be mutant-centric. Whether it's called the mutant saga or not, it's going to be very, very mutant-centric. That being said, I think it would, have come as a shock to all of us before this report came out to think that the X-Men film might be coming out 2 months after Avengers Secret Wars. That feels very quick. That is making a statement of starting out the next saga of the MCU. Not even waiting at all. Not even waiting at all. So, according to this report from Jeff Snyder, I'm going to read from this article here. This article says, quote, additionally, he reports, he being Jeff Snyder, that X-Men is expected to start filming in 2026 with Marvel Studios planning for a late 2027 release, likely slotting the eagerly awaited MCU entry for that already reserved MCU date for November 5th, 2027, although there's always a possibility it could be moved up to the July 23rd, 2027 date. So that's, it seems like it's more likely that it's going to be in the November slot, according to this report. But, like I said at the beginning, it's feasible, it's possible if this film, if it films in 2026, that this movie could be coming out in July 2027, which means it will be the very next movie after the multiverse saga, presumably. I mean, maybe they're like, oh, this is the epilogue to the multiverse saga, which is a weird thing to say. I don't know why you would say that. But anyways, so we talked about this in the previous segment, but I wanted to reiterate this because there was also a rumor going around, and this one I classify just as pure rumor, that the Russo brothers were going to be the ones to direct the X-Men. And like I said in the previous segment, those two things cannot be true. Oftentimes, two things can be true together, which most people don't seem to want to believe because, they want to, make the world into absolutes. And it's not always like that. It's actually very complicated usually. But these two things cannot be true at the same time. The Russos cannot be directing the X-Men and having the X-Men come out in 2027. It is just like 99.99999% with certainty that I say that, because if for those of you who know just any other movie production, it is all-consuming for directors. They work on these movies for years and years and years and years. Not to mention, not only are the Russos doing Secret Wars, they're doing Doomsday and Secret Wars. Where in the world are you going to find time to release another film that's coming out? Let's give it a generous, the benefit of the doubt. Let's say 6 months later or 2 months later than Avengers Secret Wars. It's not happening. So, again, I maintain that, again, Jeff Snyder, although he is right a lot of the time, he also can be wrong. He also can get things wrong. So it's possible, right? It's possible that he is wrong and that X-Men won't be coming out until 2028 or 2029, in which case, I guess, if the Russos wanted to really dive in again and direct another crazy ensemble film after directing, Avengers, Doomsday, and Secret Wars, sure, go for it. But if it's coming out in 2027, that can't be true. The other thing I wanted to talk about here, because yes, it's soon, but if they're casting and if they're moving forward and if they have a vision, go for it. Do what you want. But the other thing I wanted to talk about actually were the other dates that were related to this, because we have those flags that the MCU likes to plant, right? Those untitled release dates, and I want to go over them now in light of this X-Men news and assume that X-Men is going to fill one of the 2027 release dates and see what the other films that we have been quote unquote promised, confirmed, right? And see where they might fit into all of this. So let's look at those other release dates. So we have one in July 23rd, 2027. We have one November 5th, 2027. Obviously, Avengers Secret Wars is coming out, by the way, in May of 2027. We also have missing release dates for, I believe, February 13th, 2026 and November 6th, 2026. So we have two other release dates, or I guess three other release dates before the end of Secret Wars. And then we have two. Actually, do we have a February 2027? No, I don't think so. So we have May 2027, but I guess we don't have a February 2027 date for now. Although, it's possible that they could plant that flag if they really wanted to. But anyway, so just going back over the timeline here. So this February 2025, Captain America Brave New World. May 2025, Thunderbolts. And then July 2025, Fantastic Four First Steps. Then February 2026, because I think that November date has been vacated for now, for November 2025. So February 2026, we don't know. And then May 2026 is going to be Avengers Doomsday for now. July 2026 also, it's not listed on this Wikipedia page because it's not Marvel Studios, but it is Spider-Man 4 apparently for now. And then we have a November 2026 date, and then that goes right into Secret Wars in May 2027. And then also we just talked about that there were two release dates, July 2027 and November 2027. We also have release dates for 2028, by the way, February, May, and November. So let's fill some of those out, right? First of all, we have a missing one before Doomsday, February 2026. What could that one be? The assumption is it has to be Blade, right? Because Blade is the only film that seems like it is actually undergoing active production, even though that active production has turned into just a nightmare. But, it has to be Blade, right? Because even if Doctor Strange 3 gets up and running right now, it's a stretch to say it's going to make February 2026. It's still a stretch to say Blade is going to make February 2026. Unless Marvel is filming a secret movie, I have to assume it's Blade. So until further notice, because again, if cameras get rolling on Blade in summer, they could make that February date, I think. I don't know. Maybe they just cancel it outright. So that's also a possibility. But for now, I'm going to say we go Fantastic Four in July, and then I think we go Blade in February 2026. Then we get Avengers Doomsday 2026, May 2026, and then we have a gap until November 2026. I would assume November 2026, also Spider-Man 4, in July 2026. I would assume, though, November 2026 is going to be Doctor Strange 3. That makes the most sense to me, just in Battle World or whatever happens between Doomsday and Secret Wars. So I would assume November 2026 is going to be Doctor Strange 3. Makes the most sense to me. Then we get a break, and then we go into Avengers Secret Wars in 2027 May, and then we get to July, November. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, because I think it makes some sense that, you want the X-Men to take up the more summer release date. November is good too, but I think you'd want the X-Men to take up that summer release date. So let's just say X-Men is July 2027. November 2027 has to be Shang-Chi 2, right? Because my goodness, guys, this film, I mean, it could be Black Panther. I would assume Black Panther 3 and Shang-Chi 2 are going to flip-flop between that February 2028 and November 2027 date, but it has to be coming, right? It has to be coming. So I would hope Shang-Chi 2 is in November 2027, Black Panther 3 February 2028, because, the first Black Panther made tons of money in February, so we'll see. And then we get May and we get November of 2028, and who knows, right? We still have Armor Wars at some point, which we talked about earlier on in the podcast, and we have tons of other films. We could have an X-Force film, we could have New Mutants again, all these different things, Deadpool and Wolverine 2 or Deadpool 4, or whatever you're going to call it. So again, lots of different possibilities. I just wanted to do this. I just wanted to, it's a little thought exercise, because I think that once you put that X-Men film in 2027, all of a sudden the schedule starts to fill up. But guys, what do you think about the fact that X-Men is apparently coming really soon? I mean, yes, in 2 years, but still, quote unquote, really, really soon. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. So minor spoiler for Captain America: Brave New World, because it's been pretty public in all the marketing, or at least not all the marketing, but for those of you who have been following along with Captain America: Brave New World, you'll know this. So, but again, if you don't want to know anything, if you've just seen the main trailers, because it's come out in a couple side trailers, little TV spots and whatnot, but not really in the main trailers. So again, if you don't want to know, this is your spoiler warning. But Adamantium is going to be a part of Captain America: Brave New World. In fact, it has been confirmed that it's coming from the dead Celestial Tiamat. So they're going to find adamantium. Somehow, I guess Celestials are made of adamantium, which is, I guess, the metal of the gods, literally, in the MCU. And so we knew that was coming, and I'm very curious to see what that's going to turn into. My assumption is it's gonna have a lot of implications for the MCU, including one in particular that we all kind of we thought about, right? Because adamantium. What is adamantium most well known for in Marvel lore? Well, it's known to be associated with one character in particular, and that one character in particular is one that we've seen recently, but I'm presuming we're going to be seeing again in the MCU, whether or not it's Hugh Jackman in Secret Wars, or it's the new version in the new X-Men film, right? And that is, of course, Wolverine. Wolverine, very famously, his skeleton is made of adamantium. And there's the whole Weapon X program where he gets that grafted onto his bones and whatnot. It's a crazy thing. So, anyways, adamantium is a big part of it. And the other thing, you guys know this about me. I hate clickbait. Like, my titles and videos are, yes, meant to intrigue you and pique your curiosity, but never intentionally to lie about anything. That's not my goal, because I hate those videos or articles that are like, oh, confirmed, this and this and this and this, and it's not confirmed. It's just a complete speculation or complete rumor. But this is a quote coming directly from the director, Julius Ona, of Captain America: Brave New World, who seems to think that Wolverine is coming very soon, or at least sometime soon, and that Captain America: Brave New World will set up Wolverine. So I'm going to read this quote here, because, again, the question may arise, how much does he actually know about the future of the MCU? Maybe he's just talking and speculating here, but also, it's not nothing. Like, I think that it's, he is the person who did, as he says in this quote, which we'll read in just a second, he is the one who introduced adamantium in his film to the world, to the MCU. And I think that, it's you don't just do that for nothing, right? Adamantium is synonymous with Wolverine. So we'll see about that. But let's read this quote here from Julius Ona and see what he's got to say. So, quote, adamantium is much more durable compared to vibranium, is what he's saying. Adamantium is not like vibranium, which is able to absorb kinetic energy. Adamantium, as we know, will eventually become a part of he says Project X. It will eventually be part of the story of Wolverine. So adamantium now becomes this resource that could change the world in a way that's very different, because vibranium is something that is really under the purview of the Wakandans. This is why it becomes an amazing geopolitical football in our film. But also, what's so great about the MCU is it's an opportunity to take things that are iconic from publishing and find a way to reimagine them for our universe in a way that could be really exciting. And because we haven't had mutants in the past, because we haven't had adamantium, it's become a fun way to surprise audiences with a new sort of vision of what it could be. And I'm just still pinching myself that I get to have the movie that introduces Red Hulk, that introduces adamantium, that introduces Serpent Society. It is fun for me as a geek, and I think it's going to be a blast for all audiences when they go see this movie. I hope it is. I'm personally excited for this film still, although I'm really looking for those first reactions, because, man, if those first reactions are bad, then yikes. I know that there have been all these test screening rumors and reports and whatnot, but I'm holding out hope that this film could be still really good, or something at least very decent. So, anyways, adamantium. So it seems like Julius Ona is pointing to the fact that, yeah, I mean, duh, we all know this. Adamantium is important because Wolverine. We all know this. It's no secret, right? But it's still an interesting thing that he pointed out that, yeah, I mean, start connecting the dots, connecting the dots here, and one thing leads to another. We all know adamantium is a big part of Weapon X in the future. We all know that, and so what could this mean? Could this mean that Wolverine is going to be directly set up from Captain America Brave New World? Well, it seems like he's indicating that maybe he doesn't show up in a post-credit scene or whatever, but I mean, there could be hints of it. Like, for example, right, what if there's a character, kind of a mystery military character throughout Captain America Brave New World, and throughout the film, you don't really know who it is. And in the post-credit scene, he goes up to Tiamat, or he goes up to whoever has adamantium, and he's like, "My name is William Stryker. Give it to me," or something like that. And for people who follow comic books, it's like, oh, okay, that's a tease, and that's a hint. Now, the other, I guess the elephant in the room here is that, well, yes, I mean, sure, adamantium is tied to Wolverine, but who even knows if Earth 616 as we know it is going to exist after Secret Wars? The assumption has always been they're going to fold in a bunch of universes, and again, this is all an assumption, it's all speculation, so it's not been confirmed and anything like that. But the assumption has always been, well, yeah, I mean, so, after Secret Wars, a bunch of universes will all be tied together, and they're just going to start over. Because also, the implication is, we can't really do the prototypical X-Men origin stories for some characters like Magneto, because Magneto's origin story is so intrinsically tied to World War II and the Holocaust. And I mean, Magneto can, he can, I guess maybe you could write in something about not aging as fast or something like that. But I mean, it's getting a little farther away from that. So, and also, I guess the bigger question around that is really not so much about that, because again, you could just write in something about not aging as fast, but also, where have they been? Like, where have mutants been all this time? It's kind of crazy that the X-Men haven't been operating this whole time. Why have they been secret, et cetera, et cetera? So it would make some sense, at least, to, have them come from another universe or whatever, and that would make a little more sense. So really the question is, sure, you're setting up adamantium in Earth 616, but what is Earth 616 going to look like? Maybe, in this way, adamantium will be one of those vestiges that is carried over from Earth 616, and the X-Men will come over, and Wolverine will be Wolverine, but he will have the bone claws, and maybe this is where he starts to, get the treatment from Project X, Weapon X, right? Who knows? But I think it's interesting. I think that if the director hadn't said anything, then yeah, I mean, of course, Kevin Feige is not just going to introduce adamantium for no reason. Like, I'm sure Kevin Feige has a reason for it, but the fact that the director is also saying it makes me think there is some credence to this. Maybe we'll get some hints to Wolverine in Captain America Brave New World. We'll have to see about that. Guys, what do you think about these comments from Julius Ona that, well, yeah, I mean, duh, you connect the dots, adamantium is going to lead to a certain Wolverine? Let me know in the comments down below. All right, guys, so a while ago, we talked about the fact that there was I almost said rumor. It was a report, but let's just call it a rumored report. I don't know. It was from a source, I believe it was from Jeff Snyder, who, I've said this before, because this was never reported by any of the major trades, right? It was never reported by Hollywood Reporter or Deadline or Variety. I think it was one tier below. And so I always say there's a hierarchy of sources that we can look to and trust for movie news. If it comes from Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, or Variety, it's pretty much set in stone, at least as of that moment. Like, for example, Robert Downey Jr. cast as Dr. Doom. If Deadline reports that, at that moment, that's true. It doesn't mean that it can't change in a couple weeks. But, people like Jeff Snyder, they get some things wrong, right? They definitely get some things wrong. They also get some things right. Case in point, just like I mentioned, I think Jeff Snyder was one of the first people to report that Robert Downey Jr. was coming back as Dr. Doom. I don't remember exactly if it was Jeff Snyder that reported this. I believe it was that they were looking, Marvel being Marvel's looking at recasting T'Challa in a way that is, via the magic of the multiverse is what I believe the language was. So that was the working assumption. That was the rumor. That was the report. And then we moved on. And then just the other day, there was a quote from producer Nate Moore, who is one of the executive producers at Marvel. He's leaving soon, but he is still going to be producing Black Panther 3. And he very emphatically debunked this rumor. So this is what Nate Moore had to say in an interview with Deadline. Nate Moore said, quote, "The truth is, there's no truth to those rumors," reporting that Chadwick Boseman, or T'Challa rather, was going to be recast. He continues, "Never say never to anything. We haven't really had a lot of creative conversations with Ryan Coogler yet because he's finishing his film Sinners, the vampire movie, which comes out this year. We'll get into it later this year, but everything you read online is not true. If for no other reason than we just haven't started working on it." Okay, so it's interesting, right? Because we talk about the fact that, well, if Andrew Garfield says he's not going to be in Spider-Man No Way Home, do we trust him? We don't know. If Chris Evans says, I'm not going to be in Avengers Doomsday, do we trust him? We don't know. If a Marvel executive comes out, though, and says there's no report or there's no validity to these rumors, I tend to believe them a little bit more. And it goes, from the lower end to the top end. Like if Kevin Feige himself comes out and says something, I tend to believe him, take him at face value. Because Kevin Feige just outright lying to the media, I don't think that's going to happen. I think Nate Moore is a similar thing. So there's one way to look at this where Nate Moore is like, no, this was just a false report. Like Jeff Snyder, wherever he got his source, it's just wrong. It's just wrong information. And that's fair. I mean, it happens, right? Like that's why I say there's a hierarchy of sources out there. And again, I think that Jeff Snyder, for example, gets a lot of things right, but he also gets some things wrong. And other people like Christian Harloff, same thing. Because I think Christian Harloff reported that Natalie Portman was coming back to Star Wars, and then a couple other people were like, well, no, we don't think so. So it's all up in the air, right? And then there are scoopers and leakers, which I believe maybe like 30-40% of what they say. And I honestly, I don't really take their reports as credence. I don't take them as real fact anymore. Just fun things to think about. Like if they report Ghost Rider, is what I've been seeing. Ghost Rider is going to have a big role in Doomsday, and Ryan Gosling is going to play him. I'm like, okay. I mean, maybe. And if it comes true, then that's great. That's fine. But anyways, so I think there's one way to read this where it's like, hey, no, those reports, those rumors, just not true at all. Move on. That's not what's happening. Shuri's going to be Black Panther. Let's move on. That's fair. There's another way, though, to read this where Nate Moore is saying, well, no, the reports, which the reports were that, and this is a very specific detail in this report that came out that we covered a while ago, is that T'Challa would be recast via the multiverse. So, I think there are a couple ways to look at this in terms of, yes, like maybe he's saying it's wrong, but also maybe what Nate Moore is saying is that, well, we haven't had creative discussions about Black Panther 3, really, which is fair. I mean, that I believe him on, because yeah, Ryan Coogler is finishing up Sinners. What I also find hard to believe is that they haven't had any conversations about Black Panther 3 to this point. Because Kevin Feige, we know Kevin Feige has a plan, right? He always has a plan for the MCU. And so I find it hard to believe that they, because Black Panther 3 has been greenlit. And obviously, why wouldn't you greenlight Black Panther 3? The first two films are insanely successful financially. And I think even though the second Black Panther took a step down critically, obviously, because, I mean, how could you? It was an uphill battle the whole way, right? But, I still think it did well enough. And obviously, it's Ryan Coogler. Ryan Coogler is great. So, yeah, Black Panther 3. It's a no duh. But I still think creatively, Ryan Coogler was probably like, well, hey, this is my plan. These are some of my ideas for Black Panther 3. Obviously, Denzel is going to have a part in it. And this is what I'm thinking. Kevin Feige has to sign off on that. Kevin Feige has to be like, yeah, for sure. So I think there's little doubt that Kevin Feige knows exactly what's going to happen with a T'Challa, whether or not it is the T'Challa child, the child of Chadwick Boseman's T'Challa and Nakia becoming Black Panther, whether Shuri is going to be Black Panther, or whether, they are going to do a multiverse. But I think Kevin Feige knows that. So the other way to read this is really Nate Moore saying, no, that rumor specifically about, T'Challa being recast via the multiverse, that's not true. Because we just haven't had a conversation about that. But I think that there is a decent likelihood that, Kevin, because look, they've already kind of telegraphed, honestly, how they might replace T'Challa. At least they've given themselves one option, and that is to have T'Challa's child be named T'Challa, right? And that's, T'Challa the second, I should say. But that is one way where you can pseudo recast T'Challa if you really wanted to. I understand that there needs to be a time gap, for sure, but with Avengers Secret Wars and with Black Panther 3 not happening until after Avengers Secret Wars, we think, I'm pretty sure that's the case, then, I mean, with everything getting reset and whatnot, there could be so many different ways to age up T'Challa, young T'Challa, and have him be around the same age as Shuri or whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter, right? So I think that, I just think that this doesn't necessarily debunk the idea that there won't be a T'Challa, because again, just look at the end of Black Panther Wakanda Forever. If they're not going to go that route, they've at least given themselves the option to do it. It means they're thinking about it, right? They're thinking about a way to bring a version of T'Challa into the MCU. Whether or not that happens in Black Panther 3, I don't know. And whether or not that happens via the multiverse, where they just, another guy steps out through a portal and he's like, I am T'Challa from another universe and I'm your Black Panther now. I don't know. Maybe that's what Nate Moore was referring to. So I think this is all still a developing situation. I tend to believe Nate Moore when he says maybe the rumor that, the T'Challa that will be the MCU's T'Challa eventually, because I'm sure there will be one eventually, right? Even after Secret Wars, even if it's a long ways away, I'm sure there will be another one. But whether or not he's saying, oh yeah, it's just not going to happen the way that it was reported, where he's going to be recast via the multiverse, or whether or not he's just saying it's not happening at all, I think it's a developing situation. Guys, what do you think about this in the comments? Do you think that this report, these comments from Nate Moore, debunk the idea that T'Challa will be recast, or do you think that it's all just hiding the truth and you think he's lying? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, Captain America Brave New World is almost upon us. There has been so much said about this movie. My goodness, there has been so much said about this movie. And a lot of it has honestly been, rumors and speculations about test screenings and things that just generally cannot be verified. And so, we'll have to wait and see. In that same vein, I'm actually recording this particular segment before any reactions or first reviews have come out. And so I have no idea what people think about the movie. Maybe, later on in the week, if we have time to put it into this particular episode of the Access Blockbusters pod, there might be initial reviews or reactions. I doubt it. Usually, even for the best of their movies, Marvel doesn't release the first reactions and reviews until the week of the movie, like Monday, Tuesday-ish. And so we'll have to see. But generally speaking, I think that there's been a lot of curiosity about this movie. So, like we've been doing with a lot of upcoming shows, upcoming movies that we're excited for. And again, I am very excited for Captain America Brave New World. I think that while maybe it doesn't have the ceiling of a film like Winter Soldier or Civil War, I think it can still be very good. So like we've been doing for other projects, I am going to go through some of my hopes and some of my predictions for Captain America Brave New World that we can revisit later on when we do our review of the film, hopefully coming out in next week's episode. So, as always, I have written down some things here that we can go over. And for this particular film, I have here 3 hopes and 5 predictions. 3 hopes and 5 predictions. The hopes being just things that I think if those things occur or if those things come to fruition in the film, then we are off to a good start, and that there will be, it's more likely than not that the film will be a film that I like. And the predictions are just things that I think will happen. Pretty self-explanatory. So let's get started here with my hopes. Number 1 hope is that the story holds up, which I know is a very vague and kind of Captain Obvious thing to say. Of course, the story, it's like saying, oh, well, in order for the movie to be good, I want the story to be good. Duh. And so let me be a little bit more specific here. While we have heard a lot of speculation about, test screenings and negative edits and whatnot, and a lot of people and a lot of writers and things like that, that's all speculation, right? That's all rumor as of the recording of this segment. But what is true is that this film has undergone some changes. And how drastic, I'm not sure, but this film has undergone some changes, there have been some reshoots. Giancarlo Esposito was not supposed to be in the movie until somewhat recently. Seth Rollins was supposed to have a role in the movie, and he is not in the movie anymore. I think, there are a lot of things that have changed, right, in the last few years. It just given the writer's strike, given Kevin Feige getting his authority back. I mean, he scrapped all of Daredevil Born Again, basically, and told them to start over, and yet we're really excited about them. Meanwhile, Captain America Brave New World, well, I don't think he told them to scrap everything. I think he told them to really, go back to the drawing board on a few things, and a lot of us are kind of skeptical. Myself, I'm just curious. So I really think, just given everything that's gone on, this film has been in production, it's been filming for a long time. I just hope that the story, in totality, holds up as a solid story. Adamantium is in the film, Tiamat is in the film, Red Hulk is in the film, the leader is in the film. I think that there's a lot going on here. Giancarlo Esposito and the Serpent Society are allegedly in this film. So again, I just think a lot of this is, we'll see. Because at the end of the day, if the movie is good, none of this really will be a complaint, right? But I think that we got to get there. We got to get there, and we got to say, I want to come out of the movie saying, you know what, maybe I didn't like this thing or I didn't like this thing. That's totally fine, because every movie, you have things you don't like. But the story overall was really solid, and it made sense from beginning to end, and I understood the plot. And what I'm really hoping doesn't happen is we come out of the movie and we go, that story was a disaster. It was chaotic, and you can tell that things were pieced together. That's really what I don't want to happen. So that is my first hope. Hope number 2 is the Red Hulk doesn't, quote unquote, unground the film. The idea of groundedness is an interesting one, because we live in a world, or in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where there are aliens everywhere. There are Egyptian gods and She-Hulks and mutants and all these other multiverses. So it feels a little weird to say. I think, though, the reason I say this here is because this film in particular, and Kevin Feige said it, Anthony Mackie I think has said it, that they really wanted to go back to this Winter Soldier spy thriller kind of tone, and the trailers have seemed to promise that, in almost every aspect. It's kind of a paranoia thriller in every aspect except for one, a very glaring red exception, and that is the Red Hulk. I'm not saying that Red Hulk inherently can't fit into a story like this, not at all. I think that, in fact, everything I've seen from Red Hulk, a character that even before they announced this movie, even before they announced that Thaddeus Ross was going to be in this movie as Red Hulk, as soon as Thaddeus Ross returned to the MCU in Civil War and Infinity War and Endgame, I was like, I think that they're probably going to be setting up a Red Hulk, and I'm just not that interested in it. I don't want to see a really, an older man just turning into a Red Hulk. I think that's weird. And truthfully, everything that we've seen from the promotions has gotten me more excited about the idea of a Red Hulk. So it's not that Red Hulk inherently, to me, is a bad idea. I'm just hoping that whatever story they are telling, if they are going in a more grounded direction, that Red Hulk does not work to undermine that, and that every time Red Hulk is on the screen, you're just like, oh my gosh, this is a different movie altogether. This is wacky, and this is more, comic book. It's more Thor Ragnarok, right, instead of Winter Soldier. And so I really hope that Red Hulk fits into the story well, that he is kind of the monster, the nuclear weapon that maybe Leader is using, against Sam Wilson, and we'll have to see what his actual role is and how Harrison Ford plays into that. But I'm very curious to see how all these things are going to integrate into this story, into one cohesive narrative. So there is that. And number 3, I really hope, and honestly, this one might be the most important one of all. At the end of the movie, my hope is that we believe Sam Wilson can lead the Avengers by the end of the film. I am not one of those people who thinks Sam Wilson cannot be Captain America. In fact, I already buy into him as Captain America. That's not really my problem. That's not really what I'm addressing here. While I think that Sam Wilson is definitely Captain America, watching The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, a series that, I didn't love, but I thought that it did a good job of building up the character of Sam Wilson to be, enough to take up the mantle, having him deal with his own self-doubts and really going through and allowing him to wrestle with this journey of identity and saying, can a black man be Captain America? Of course, but, is the world ready for that? And that's what Sam had to wrestle with in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So again, Sam Wilson as Captain America, totally on board with that, totally buy that. I bought that as soon as that happened in Endgame. I was like, yep, that's great. That's a really good idea. Especially now that Chris Evans is allegedly not Captain America anymore, although we'll see if he comes back. But what I'm not as sold on as of this moment is Anthony Mackie leading the Avengers, because Anthony Mackie is a great actor. He does some terrific stuff in other projects. So, I buy that he can lead a movie for sure, but leading the Avengers is just, it's almost a different, ball game altogether, right? I think Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr., Robert Downey Jr. is Robert Downey Jr., he has the charisma for days. I'm not saying that Anthony Mackie doesn't have the charisma, but comparing him to Chris Evans, for example, Chris Evans in the first Avenger, in first Avengers, led the Avengers, but it was only 6 people, right? And I think that he grew into his own as that character. And I think by the time we get to Infinity War and Endgame, you're like, yeah, I believe that he can lead, this huge Avengers team. Like, by the time we get to the Avengers Assemble scene in Endgame, you're like, I believe that. And if rumors are to be believed that Anthony Mackie will have a significant role in Doomsday and Secret Wars, and that he will maybe be one of the leaders of the Avengers, I just want to make sure, or I just want to see by the end of the film that this is a leader. This is somebody who can take charge of all these disparate characters, gods and metahumans and aliens and all these different people, and bring them together under one group and say, this is the Avengers. I'm going to lead it. Let's go. That's what I'm really hoping for. So we'll see about that. And yeah, those are my 3 hopes for the film. Let's get into 5 predictions here. Going to run through them pretty quickly because either they're going to happen or they're not going to happen. So we'll have to see about that. The first one, my prediction, is that the post-credits scene is a direct lead into Doomsday. That one feels like a little bit of a shoe-in here, but, I don't know what else it could be leading to other than Thunderbolts, because, that also seems possible. So I think it's 50-50 Doomsday or Thunderbolts, but I have to say I think that it's probably going to be a lead into Doomsday, just because Captain America is going to have a big role in Avengers Doomsday. So that is my number 1 prediction. Number 2, Thunderbolt Ross dies, and that's why the team is named the Thunderbolts in the Thunderbolts film. The reason I say this is because I don't think Harrison Ford is going to be doing this for much longer. As sad as it is to say, he is not getting any younger, and I don't think Harrison Ford is signing up to be, the leader of the Midnight Suns in 2034 or whatever. I don't think that is the case, and so I think he probably wanted to join the MCU once, had a good time. I hope. He seems to really like Anthony Mackie. And then it leads into the next film, Thunderbolts, because somehow Val is going to take, like, oh, the president is dead and he's a martyr now and whatever. And we're going to name our team the Thunderbolts and, all that kind of stuff. So that's my thought with that. Number 3, the film sets up a vibranium adamantium resource war that fractures Earth for when Doctor Doom shows up. I'm of 2 minds of this prediction, honestly. I could see this. What I'm pretty convinced of is that the film will set up a vibranium adamantium war. Whether or not this plays into Doomsday is really what this prediction kind of hinges on, because I also could just see this happening in the background and then it'll lead into Black Panther 3 more so than Doomsday, or both. It could definitely lead into both. But I think that bottom line, this prediction is saying, I think that with Adamantium entering the picture here, and possibly mutants and maybe Wolverine coming in, the new Wolverine, I think that there's a pretty distinct possibility also with the way Wakanda Forever ended, that this is going to really start that World War III kind of vibe that we got going on Earth in this particular moment in the MCU. So that is prediction number 3. Prediction number 4, Giancarlo Esposito's Sidewinder and the Serpent Society are in the movie for maybe 10 minutes. I'm going to say less than 10 minutes because, they inserted these characters basically in reshoots. And while it is Giancarlo Esposito, and while he is a fantastic actor, I think that they're really not going to be in the film that long. I think maybe just like 5 to 10 minutes of screen time is my prediction there. And finally, prediction number 5, I think Bucky will have a cameo. And the reason I say this is actually kind of interesting, not just because Bucky was in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and they were paired together, but actually because what we know in Thunderbolts is that Bucky's a congressman now, and this movie takes place in DC. It almost would seem weird unless Thunderbolts takes place way after Captain America: Brave New World and Bucky becomes a congressman after that. But I mean, I think it's kind of weird actually if Bucky doesn't show up for a little bit, just to say hi to Sam or do something. Because if he is in DC and Sam is in DC, as we see with the White House explosion, there's actually a decent potential for Bucky to have some kind of small size role in Captain America: Brave New World. We'll see. But that is my thought. I think Bucky will probably have a small cameo. I also said previously too that I think Mark Ruffalo will have a very brief cameo, so I'll just throw that in as a bonus, but we talked about that before, so I'm not going to rehash that here. So guys, those are my hopes and predictions for Captain America: Brave New World. I am hoping for a great film. I have no reason to believe it can't be a great film. I also have nothing to believe that it couldn't be a disaster, but I'm really hoping for a good film. I think that it has the makings of a good film, and we'll just have to see when it comes out, and the next time we'll be talking about this movie is probably going to be after I have seen it. So guys, what are your hopes and predictions for Captain America: Brave New World? Are you excited for this film, or are you still kind of nervous? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, we have made it to the day. If you are listening to this podcast episode, we now live in a world, in a universe, where an MCU Fantastic Four trailer is out. It is very exciting. I would argue that this movie, in fact, ironically, this movie and Superman are opening 2 weeks apart, but this movie is very similar to Superman. It doesn't have nearly as much writing on it as Superman does, to be fair, because Superman has the weight of an entire new cinematic universe that, it really needs to do well in terms of critical success in order for the DCU to at least have a fighting chance, because the DCEU failed so spectacularly in terms of critical reception and box office performance and whatnot. But we're not here to talk about the DCU or the DCEU, just comparing the two films, because I think Fantastic Four First Steps, while not, again, if Fantastic Four First Steps doesn't work, I don't think Marvel is doomed necessarily, but I think that it's doomed, no pun intended. But I do think that it's going to be a critical, it's a critical fork in the road, because I think Fantastic Four are going to be a big part of the MCU, but also there's a lot of pressure for Fantastic Four to work because they just haven't worked previously in other iterations. So we now have seen the first teaser trailer for Fantastic Four First Steps, and I thought it was amazing. Dare I say, this time, pun intended, fantastic. To be upfront, there are two things in the trailer that I'm not even going to say I hated, I just didn't like. And one of those things is really just trailer specific, although it could be movie specific, which I'll touch on in just a second. But I want to get to just overall thoughts. I'll talk about then the two things that I kind of didn't like, and then we'll just talk about all the things I loved in the trailer. But overall thoughts. If this is a teaser trailer, because it is, it's called the official teaser trailer, and it was just going to give us a sense of what the film was like. I think I'm so on board with what's going on here. One of the most underrated things about this movie, because yes, the cast is great. Joseph Quinn, loved him in Stranger Things. Vanessa Kirby, she's awesome in a lot of projects. Eben Moss-Backrack, Emmy Award winner from The Bear, by the way. That thing bit, with Herbie when he's cooking. I think that was a very intentional nod to The Bear that other people pointed out. And then, of course, Pedro Pascal, Mandalorian, but more importantly to me, Last of Us. And, he's such a good actor. And I mean, we're not going to talk about Wonder Woman 1984. But anyways, the cast is incredible. We see Galactus. But, the vibe of the trailer, the tone of the trailer, the family orientation, just how focused it is on them being a family together. I love it. I think it's fantastic. Again, I'm going to keep saying the word fantastic, and probably it's mostly unintentional, but, maybe it's intentional. Anyways, the two things, though, that I didn't like, before we get into all the things that I loved about the trailer. Well, number one, I'm not going to lie, especially in that scene where the Thing was cooking, the visual effects are not super impressive to me. I think later on in the trailer we see him running. It's much quicker and he's in motion, so it's a little harder to tell. And he's also a little bit further away from the camera, so again, it's a little bit harder to tell. And then later on also, he's kind of in the shadows looking at the TV and seeing himself as a human, seeing the Eben Moss-Backrack version of himself. And I think in the shadows, it actually looked a lot better somehow. It almost looked like, in that shot, it looked like practical effects, actually, which was really cool. But in the scene where he's just being lit by kitchen lights and it's just kind of, full lighting on his face and everything, it looked a little plasticky, I'm not going to lie, in the scene where Herbie is helping him cook dinner or whatever he's doing. And again, I've said this many times. For me personally, visual effects are almost never going to make or break a movie. If they're so bad, because there are always exceptions that break the rule, if they're so bad that they're distracting, then sure, it's going to detract from my enjoyment. And if they're so good, case in point, Avatar: The Way of Water, for example, that they add to the experience, then of course they're going to make the movie better. But on balance, right? If the Thing, if his CGI is not the best, right? Whatever, I'll get over it. If his CGI is incredible, but the movie is terrible, because honestly, I think the CGI for the Thing in Fantastic Four, the 2015 version, was pretty good, honestly, and that didn't make the movie any better. So, no, visual effects to me never make or break a movie, ever. I shouldn't say ever. Almost never make or break a movie for me. I said this about the Avengers, right? 2012's The Avengers. I think Captain America's costume in The Avengers is terrible. It's awful. Like, who designed that? It's awful. But doesn't make the movie any worse, doesn't make it any better. It is what it is, right, for me, because the movie itself is so good. So anyways, that's one thing, though. If I had to point out a couple things I didn't like, number one, not super thrilled with how plasticky he looks in that scene. And the second thing I mentioned earlier might just be a trailer thing, honestly. It may not have any impact on the movie itself, although I suspect it actually will play into the movie. And actually, that might not be a bad thing, because the other thing I didn't quite love was the choir singing Fantastic Four at the end of the trailer. I don't know. It just totally, the trailer was great. It was humming. All of a sudden, we hear a choir sing Fantastic Four as the title comes up, and I was like, oh, that's kind of lame. And I had a very similar experience actually with the Black Panther Wakanda Forever, that first trailer, which I still maintain is not only the best MCU trailer that I've ever seen, it is one of the best trailers. It might be the best trailer I've ever seen. That first Black Panther Wakanda Forever trailer. It's amazing. It's phenomenal. I mean, that trailer alone makes me want to cry every time I see it because, again, it's incredible. But at the end of that trailer as well, the logo comes up and somebody whispers Wakanda Forever, and I was like, oh, do we really need that? Doesn't make it any less, the best trailer that I've ever seen, but it's just something where I'm like, oh, whatever. The reason I say it might actually play into the movie is because it seems like there is a lot of self-awareness around the Fantastic Four as a brand, right? Like these are, there are kids cheering for them. So it seems like it's sort of a worldwide or at least, a global or United States kind of phenomenon that they are the Fantastic Four, the astronauts, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe. And maybe they have a theme song, and it's that. I don't know. Michael Giacchino doing the score for this, by the way, amazing. I love Michael Giacchino. So I don't know if he composed that or whatever. I've heard the theme. The theme is great. But yeah, I mean, that was the other thing I kind of didn't like. Let's get to all the things I love, though. Matt Shakman. Matt Shakman was the perfect choice to direct this. I know John Watts was originally going to direct this, and I would have been so on board for that as well. But seeing the way that Matt Shakman is approaching this, it gave me all sorts of WandaVision vibes in the best possible way, especially at the beginning of the trailer when the aspect ratio is more the traditional TV kind of setup, right? The old, the smaller aspect ratio, just like how he did in WandaVision, which I loved. I think that's fantastic. The retro 60s vibe, great, But most importantly of all, and I don't know if he wrote the script for this. I don't think he wrote the scripts from WandaVision either, but he's able to direct actors so well. He's able to direct emotions so well, because what I loved about this trailer over everything else, because sure, I mean, Galactus looming over New York City, kind of cool, kind of looks, I don't know, looks a little plasticky. Maybe that's by design. I don't know. And then seeing, Human Torch flying around and seeing him in space, which is great. I think Joseph Quinn looks awesome in the role. Thing being Thing is great. Herbie looks fun. Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby look great together. It's so crazy to think that we were speculating about all these different permutations of the cast, like Adam Driver and Margot Robbie and all these other people. And yet when I see this team on the screen, that is what a good casting director does. They focus on the vision of the story they're given and not the vision of all these fans who have no idea what the story is. Because when I see this family on screen, I'm like, oh, perfect casting. And so, and again, we haven't seen the movie yet, so who knows, right? But, what I loved about this trailer, getting back to that point, is that there is true heart and emotion at the center of this. I love that really the only lines we hear from the movie, other than the beginning, welcome to the Baxter Building, is this thing of like Pedro Pascal's Reed Richards saying, well, before the accident, or he didn't call it an accident, but before our mission, you didn't turn invisible. And there's a scene where he's trying to hold her, but she turns invisible, which is, I don't know, that's kind of haunting. And then he's like, and Ben was, wasn't a bunch of rocks, and Johnny wasn't, be able to turn into fire. To which, Vanessa Kirby, Sue Storm, she responds, well, Ben was always a rock, and Johnny's always Johnny, and I'm right here. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. That's the kind of heart and emotion that it just harkens back to WandaVision in all the best ways. And guys, I mean, this trailer, aside from the two little things that I didn't like, and it's a teaser trailer, so again, this movie could be bad. I mean, we don't know that, but the trailer, I mean, it won me over. Now, I'd be curious to know, for people who have no idea who the Fantastic Four are, who are not remotely excited for this, and who saw the trailer, I'd be very curious to hear how they experienced it. So if any of you guys are like that in the comments, let me know, because I'd be very curious to hear how this trailer hit you. I think obviously a lot of hardcore comic book fans are going to be very excited about this trailer, but yeah, I mean, I was blown away by it, and I think that we are on such good footing. I desperately hope Captain America Brave New World is good, because Thunderbolts, I think, is pretty much a lock to be a decent, if not good film. I think, at least. It has all the makings of it, and I think Fantastic Four could be great. So I'm really hoping Captain America Brave New World is at least good, because that means that 2025 is going to be a great year for the MCU. But guys, what did you think about the first teaser for for Fantastic Four First Steps? Are you excited, or did you actually not like the trailer? Which is totally fine, but let me know about that in the comments down below. And everybody, we have made it to the end of the Access Blockbusters Pod, episode number 64. Thank you all so much, if you are listening to the end, for joining me. It's a privilege to be able to do this and be able to share my thoughts on these things with you guys, but also to hear your thoughts every single week, every single segment. it's been just amazing. And so you continuing to push forward, continuing to push out segments and podcast every single day on the YouTube channel. And of course, podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Overcast every single week as well. Next time you hear me talk about Captain America Brave New World will be when I have seen the film. So I'm very excited about that, guys, and hopefully you guys are as well. We'll see. We won't be talking about the first reviews and reactions because that'll be coming out the same week as the movie comes out. So hopefully, good reviews, but we won't really be talking about it next week because we'll be talking about the film and my own personal thoughts. It's exciting. The MCU is back in theaters after Deadpool and Wolverine, and we will see where we go from here. Guys, thank you so much for listening and watching as always, and I will see you guys in the next one.